Howdy folks, Little John in the brewery. I'm having a bit of a yarn. Let's call it chatting on Tuesday, seeing it's not Friday. It's not a 5 on Friday. Been a little while since I've really done this sort of video. Anyway, that's just so happens I'm still stuck at home with my leg recovering. So I'm in the middle of a brew day. Just sitting down having a beer while it's chilling. Thought might as well use the time to have a bit of a chat. Now, what I want to talk about is using rice in your beer. Now, this has come from a question from one of my patrons via the Patreon page. So I'm not sure who that was, but whoever it was, it's taken a while to get to it. But anyway, here we are. So on that note, big thank you to all the Patreons. Cheers guys, support is much appreciated, as I always say. If you're interested in what Patreon's about, it's just a way of supporting Little John and supporting the channel, making sure that we've got the availability of doing different brews and things, and different experiments and stuff like that. So there's a link down the bottom, jump on there, have a look. It's, you know, might be just the right thing for you. Maybe Patreon's not the thing. Maybe you just hit the subscribe button down the bottom there if you haven't already done so, and get notified when there's new videos come up. And as always, hit the like button. All these things help out Little John, keep the channel going. But anyway, continuing on. As I said, someone had asked about using rice in your brewing and sort of the process and how you go about doing it. So this is something I could have done a demonstration video and sort of almost like a brew school, but it's probably works well just as a conversation. Now you can go back and have a look. I've done a few brews recently with the rice. I've done a rice lager, and come out really well. I've got the second keg of that on the tap at the moment. Had a glass last night. It's drinking really well, and that's simply just using flaked rice. Just buy it straight from your home brew shop. It's called flaked rice. It's just a grain. It's just been, I believe it's steamed and then flattened. So it's gelatinized, which means it's easily able to have its sugars converted. So as long as you've added that into a mash that is the majority of a base malt, then there is enough diastatic power, which is just basically means it's got enough enzymes in it that it will convert its own sugar and also can convert other sugars. Diastatic power is a whole different thing, and we don't need to go into it today because the amount of rice that we're talking about using in batches here is not enough that diastatic power becomes an issue. But diastatic power is something you really don't need to look at until you start unless you're getting into very specific specialised brewing. Generally, diastatic power is not a concern for the average home brewer. The average all-grain brewer is using base malt, in the range of 70 or 80, 90% of their grain. It's never going to have an issue. It's not till you start getting into 50-50 brews that you can start having a problem. That being said, I've done 60% corn beers that have converted without any problem. So it's not an issue you need to worry about, particularly in this circumstance. Okay, so the flaked rice is a very easy way of getting rice into your beer, and basically you can run up to 30 or 40% of your grain bill as flaked rice to get a rice lager. So that's like the Japanese, Asian, that sort of beers, Asahi, Chang, Tsingtao, that sort of stuff, Singer. Those beers from that section of the world where they are predominantly, not predominantly, but they use a lot of rice due to the fact they've got a lot of rice available. And it falls in the same thing as a lot of areas where they use, different places they use a lot more maize in their beer, they use a lot more wheat because that's a readily available ingredient. So Asian beers tend to use a lot of rice, and there's a lot of commercial lagers that get around that use a smaller amount of rice just for body and mouthfeel more than anything else. Definitely from the perspective of a home brewer, you're paying a lot more for rice than you will pay for a base grain. So it's not an economics thing, where it more likely is in other places. So flaked rice is simple because you just add it to your mash. You just you throw in your base malt, Pilsner, or a pale malt, whatever it is you want, whatever it is you're using. But generally, I mean, in most circumstances, if you're using rice, you're brewing a lager. You're brewing a light lager, so you're more than likely going for a Pilsner malt, or maybe a mix of Pilsner and a little bit of a pale or a Munich or a Vienna or something, just for a little bit of extra maltiness. But generally, it's that light base. And you can just add it straight into your mash. You just mash exactly the same as you would with any beer. So it's no different to making, a European lager or an American lager, whatever it is. You just bung it in, mash it at whatever temperature you want to mash at, and it'll come out. And you'll generally get fairly similar numbers gravity-wise per gram that you will with your base malt. It's not much. There's very little difference. And say software, you're using any decent software, it's gonna have the flaked rice in there, and the numbers are very accurate. I've done brews and I've hit numbers, within 2 points every time, without any issues. So there's no problem there. Now, the other way you can use rice is your more traditional method of doing an actual cereal mash and using rice, store-bought, whole grain rice, white rice. Same thing you use when you're making bloody, when you're cooking at home. Buy it from the supermarket in a big bag. Now, from an economic standpoint, that's a cheaper option than going with your grain. But you've then got a more intensive process that you've got to go through. So basically, you need to cook your rice and fully cook it down to basically a big sludge, like just a thick ricey goop, till the rice is fully cooked, and then you add that into your mash. So you'd have your mash going while you're mashing your base malt. Say at 65 degrees, you boil up your rice and water on the stove. Boil it for 10-15 minutes till it's nice and it's fully brewed. It's fully cooked, and it's softened, and it becomes that that big gloopy mess that rice becomes. You then add that back into your beer. Now, there are temperature points where that works best, and I'm pretty sure it's around 68 degrees, at which point when you put that muck into your mash, around 68, it basically all breaks down. The enzymes from that diastatic power of your base grain gets in and eats it breaks down the sugars and the starches, or more the starches in the rice, and turns them to sugar, and that big lumpy stuff will just grab and it basically just turns into a soup and becomes part of your mash. And it happens, yeah, very quickly when you get into that temperature range. So basically, like I said, you do your normal mash in your mid sort of 60s for 40 minutes or whatever. And so then, as part of the process of going up to your mash out at say 72 degrees, you're dumping in your rice, and you're coming up through that 68. And when you get there, that rice suddenly, and it's the same with using corn. Corn will do the same thing. But that's slightly different thing. But it's similar. It's still doing that cereal mash. So you'll see a lot of, particularly if you're looking at older information, like older books or talking to even older brewers, they will talk about cereal mashes. And a lot of breweries, probably the big breweries, probably still do cereal mashes because they would be using rice due to the cheaper nature. And it's probably just works better for them. So if you're coming across a recipe that says you need a certain amount of rice in a cereal mash, then you can do that cereal mash and boil it up and cook it and bring it in. But you just need to be aware that you've got to go through that temperature range to convert those sugars, because that starch in that rice, you do that cereal mash, it hasn't converted, it's just starch. You've got to get it from starch to break down into your sugars. And again, that's scientific and not going into it here, but that's what the diastatic power of your base malt is doing. Same as your standard mash. You're taking the starch from your grain, breaking it down into sugars, which then are available for your yeast to eat. The rice is the same. You're creating the starch and then you're needing to break the sugars down, so that's where you add it in. So there's really your two options of how you want to go about doing it. You could, I would imagine, there'd be I can't see any particularly reason why you could not do you could boil, and I've done this once with, I have done it once. You can boil your corn, your rice, make up your big cereal mash, and make it to high volume, and then have it at a higher temperature. But then add your grain to that and let it cool. Let it come back down to mash temperature, and it does the same thing. You'll have a big gluggy mess that as the temperature comes down, it comes back down into that higher 60s range, will suddenly start to loosen up and turn back into a normal looking mash. So if you're limited in space, that is an option that you can do as well. You can do that you can just do that in your mash tun or in your brew pot. But either of those cereal mashes are a bit more fiddling intense. It's certainly far easier to just go with flaked corn, the flaked rice. Spend a little bit extra. It's not a lot when you're doing it. If you're talking a 23 litre batch, and if you're talking say 20% rice, you're only looking at a kilo. Thereabouts. So it might cost you $6-7 for your kilo of flaked rice, as opposed to $1.50 you know, whatever it is for a kilo of, you know, $2, $3 for a kilo of rice at the from the supermarket. But, you know, for me, $3 or $4 just to go, just put in the mash and just mash and not worry about it, yeah, I'm not even thinking twice about that. And then you just continuing, your brew day just goes exactly as per normal. You go through the same mash steps you normally would, the cooling process and your ferment. Nothing changes. The only difference is you've got a brew now that's got an amount of corn in it. I keep saying corn. It's got an amount of rice in it. Problem is I'm sitting here looking at a big bag of flaked corn. And when anyone's been watching, I've been using a bit of flaked corn, so it's sort of been, it's in my head a little bit. But yeah, and it's the same process. That's the same thing. Whether it's rice or corn, even wheat to some degree is the same. Wheat has very low diastatic power. I've got a funny feeling that plain wheat has no diastatic power, but malted wheat has some, but not much. But don't quote me on that, and certainly, you know, don't tell me you want if I'm wrong. I always work on the basis that wheat has no diastatic power if I'm going to worry about it. But again, never use enough of it for it to be a concern. So, don't be afraid to use rice or corn, you know, these adjuncts. Don't be afraid to use these things as opposed to just using sugar or like dextrose when you're looking to get a little bit of lightness or a little bit of yeah, change in your body or your mouthfeel of your beer. It's going to cost you a little bit more, yes, but at the end of the day, a couple of dollars over a batch is nothing. So that's it. I hope that's answered the question. For whoever asked it, and a fair chance whoever even asked it has possibly even forgotten I even asked it in the first place. I think it's been a while since it was done. But in that vein, if you do have any questions, any comments, as always, stick them down the bottom. Go for it. Once again, thank you to the patrons. Thank you to all the subscribers. Check it out down below. Check out Patreon if you're interested. See what it's about. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't. Smash the like button. You know, come along for the ride. Get notified when things are happening. But other than that, about to get on with the rest of this brew. So, Little John, we've chatting on Tuesday. So till I see you again, we're brewing beer, talking beer or drinking beer. Good brewing.